The subject of crisis, I think, is one of the most interesting subjects of our time, particularly now, but also just in our individual life. We talk a lot about having a sustainable planet, and this is good, and we should be having that discussion. But we also need a sustainable life, we need a sustainable body, and we need a sustainable home. And crisis, which usually is conjoined with grief, is not something that we experience less as we age, it's something we experience more, and that's not something people tell us when we're small. It's assumed in our society that as we age, we are more able to handle such things. But there's so many assumptions in our society that it boggles the imagination. Assumptions which are incorrect. Assumptions like puberty. It just happens, right? You don't have to plan on it. It just occurs. Your body develops and suddenly you start becoming an adult human being. And then, of course, we don't really talk about that. We don't really talk about the subject of happiness, although we talk about success all the time. We don't teach children how to become happy. We don't discuss ethics. And we don't discuss, especially, grief and shame. Crisis brings up usually those two emotions, and we're taught almost nothing about them. I won't do it this evening, but I think you'll get my point when I say, when I talk about these subjects in groups and I ask people for a show of hands on who in here was mentored on how to handle grief when they're stricken by it, no hands go up, or maybe one if they went to a special school. And how many people were mentored on how to handle other people's grief or other people's crises, and the same thing, people don't raise their hands. So basically we're in the dark. We're in the dark. And as we age, we lose more people. I was talking to a man who's in his 70s, and he says, I don't even want to answer the phone anymore. So it seems like every month I find out someone else has cancer, someone else has had a stroke, things like that. And to me, this is one of the biggest tragedies, unspoken tragedies in our culture. And it also reveals itself very strongly in the military, doesn't it? Because how to handle grief isn't taught there either. In fact, quite the opposite. I was talking to a lieutenant colonel in the Army just the other day, and he said, we're actually taught to suppress it, or else. You have to suppress it. And in a military battle, suppressing grief is a good idea. Because if you're in a firefight and someone next to you dies, you can't just put your weapon down and say, I need some time. You have to push it down. You have to survive and take care of each other and finish the battle and the war. It would be illogical to do what I just described, to say, no, I need some time right now. I need to explore my feelings. But similarly, it is illogical to come back into civilized life and to not do that. To still live as if you are in war when you're not in the war. My friend who's in the Army, the one I mentioned, said if I had my way, if my wife left me, I'd have a pistol in every room hidden, because that's what makes me feel safe. And that sort of way of thinking probably kept him alive through 3 wars, Bosnia, Iraq, and Afghanistan. But at home, with 4 children, it's not reasonable. So context has something to do with what I'm talking about. What position are we in? And where did we learn this? Where did our society come up with this idea of when you experience grief through crises, suppress it and don't talk about it? I think it's because in the old days there was so much of it, there was so much grief, and so few options on how to process it. If you look back to the year, let's say 1900, in America, 70% of people were involved in farming or food production. Basically, almost everybody was working hard all day. And when they became older and started getting arthritis or bad lower back, there was no chiropractor. There are no medicines for your arthritis, probably not even aspirin. There was no massage therapy. I mean, think about it. And for your emotional issues, no counseling therapy, no self-help books, no yoga. There was the pub and there was the church or the synagogue or the temple. That's it. That's what you got. So a lot of people use both. And they would use alcohol not only for emotional solace, but for their arthritis, their knee pain, their hand pain. And imagine working with terrible arthritis late into your 60s. And then, of course, there were the wars, and pestilence, and drought, and starvation, and infant mortality. You remember what that was like? Going back a little further, Thomas Jefferson, who was a wealthy man, he and his wife had 13 children. One survived to age 20. So people were constantly burying their children. And I can't imagine. It was normal to lose 2 or 3 or 4 children when they were just babies or toddlers. So if you look at that, that's how society was. You kind of had to move on, get on with it, as they used to say, because something else is going to happen in the next 5 minutes, it seemed like. But now, in this world that we live in, it's irrational, it's illogical to live this way. We have resources, we have more time, yet we still behave as if it's 1890 or earlier. And the more I talk about it, the more I'm stunned at how deep the subject is in our society. Because the problem with suppressing or repressing grief is that it doesn't go away. We hold on to it, we push it down into our body, literally into our body, and we go about our life, and then something else happens, and we push that one down, and they become stacked on top of each other. And we wear kind of armor around our chest, around our heart, to protect ourselves, which really distances more than protects. Because armor doesn't really act like such a good filter. A filter would protect us from people who mean us harm and let the good ones in. But the armor doesn't really do that. I notice in our culture, we're not very good at saying I love you to people. Have you noticed that? I mean, direct eye contact, I mean it, I love you. And I don't have to crack a joke, or make a face, or say now we're the Mutual Admiration Society, or laugh. I'm not talking about romantic love, the love of your life, I'm just talking about friends. This has been incredibly difficult for me to learn based on my upbringing, because this was not a phrase that was commonly used in my household, and I'm sure many of you can relate to this also. Now some people are just masters at it. They're unbelievable, and it makes your jaw drop sometimes, doesn't it, when someone can just fully express their love to everybody in their life that they truly love. But most of us aren't that good. I see it all the time. And you know what else? Not only are we taught to suppress our grief when crisis happens, but since we don't know what to do when someone else has grief, we tend to avoid them. And I've researched this with my own groups throughout about 15 different countries now. I asked them, why is this? When one of your friends or family members really experiences grief, is your tendency to avoid them? Show of hands, yes. Why? Is it because you feel awkward and don't know what to do? You think you'll make it worse? Show of hands, yes. This is what most of us feel like. I don't know what to do, I don't know what to say, I'm going to make things worse. Well, why don't we know what to do? Why don't we know what to say? Because we aren't taught nothing. And so, not only then do you have a loss, and when I say grief, I don't just mean losing someone through death. It could be the end of a romantic relationship, marriage. It could be loss of a career, loss of innocence. There are 50 reasons to experience tremendous grief. I just met this couple a few weeks ago. I gave this similar talk, in case you think I'm exaggerating. I'm sorry, it upsets me just to talk about it. This couple came up to me at the end of the talk. They were in their mid-30s, and they said, we just lost our 1-year-old to a child care accident. So someone else is taking care of their children. And they lost their little boy. And they said, half our friends stopped calling us. And one couple called us specifically to say they would not be calling anymore because they have a child around the same age and it freaks them out to be around death like this. I've talked to lots of other parents. This is common. This is not unusual. So not only were they then grieving their child, they lost half their friends and felt ashamed. And this is the society we live in. I spoke with a widow the other day, 35 years old. She got married in her 20s to a soldier. The soldier went to Afghanistan, fought, came back with post-traumatic stress syndrome. She worked so hard to help her husband, and then one day he committed suicide. And as you may know, we lose 20 soldiers to suicide a day in this country. And his parents wouldn't speak to her anymore. And the other army wives ostracized her. She was pushed out of the community. And at first I thought, it's probably something she said or did, or it's her personality, or who knows why. And then she said, this is extremely common. I belong to a support group for this. This happens all the time. Once again, the most tragic thing that could happen to her, and instead of being embraced by our community, she's pushed out of it. Now this is cultural, because there are other cultures that handle this sort of thing much better than we do. If you just even look around the Mediterranean region, the Italians, the Greeks, the Arab cultures are more apt to express their grief in public, and it's acceptable, where it isn't as much in Northern Europe and so on. But also other cultures. One of my favorite stories is a story from Tibet. In the early 1960s, an explorer from England went to find the snow leopard. Matheson, I think his last name was. And I read the book, and the only thing I really remember about it is this story. While he was traveling through Tibet, he was way up in the mountains, and there were just small villages, a couple of hundred people per village, and they lived in what we would call huts. They were their homes. And he was with a Sherpa with lots of equipment. And while they were going through their equipment, he heard someone yelling, and they looked outside of the hut they were staying in. And one of the Tibetan men ran out of his hut with a piece of paper in his hand, and he was weeping, and he was shouting and shouting. And the Englishman said, what's happening? And Sherpa said, I don't know, let's go see. So the Sherpa interpreted to him what he was seeing. And he says, his wife left him this note. And the whole village started coming out of their homes and going to this young man. He says, basically it's your Dear John letter. And he sits down, and everybody sits down around him, and he reads the letter out loud to his entire community. And then the whole community started to cry. And I'm sure they weren't just crying for him. They knew his wife. They knew the man she ran away with. He was a member of the village. But the response was surround him and be involved in this process, in his grief, as opposed to we'll just stay away from you until you feel better. So there are other cultures that handle it slightly different than we do. The American way is, she left me, where's the bar? And there I can talk to the bartender because I'll be so drunk I won't care. So it's a very, very in-depth subject, and it's almost like we're children when we describe how we behave around this issue. No clue. So the interesting thing is to be with people who are going through crisis is really not that difficult. You just have to not be afraid of it. And you don't have to say anything like Socrates. Often people, they say to me, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. I don't want to go see Grandpa on his deathbed, even though he wants to see me. I don't know what to say. You could say, I love you. You could, and here's a good one. If someone is grieving, you could say, this year it's your turn. Maybe next year it's my turn. We're all in this together. And I'm not going anywhere. No, you go home, I'll be okay. No, you won't. And others will try to cheer up their friends who are grieving. That's the worst thing you can do. If you try to cheer up someone who's just lost their child, for example, you're lucky if they don't punch you in the face. The person actually has to go through a grieving process. And you have to let them. It's almost as if you were, let me see, good example. I break my leg. I'm in the hospital. I mean a bad break. I have traction. I mean, my leg's in traction. I have pins in my bone. Don't come in and try to cheer me up. Don't say, your leg will get better. I know my leg's going to get better. But right now, I'd like the nurse to come in and give me more medication for pain. Would you go check on that, please? That's how you can help me right now. I'd rather you just say, it's going to really hurt for a couple of weeks, and then it'll hurt a little less, but it's going to hurt for a while. Because that's exactly how it is. And you're not going anywhere. You know, we're all in this together. When you go through grief with someone, it builds a stronger friendship. It's actually a bridge between people that is there forever. This is why soldiers come back from war with such strong bonds, because they've been through grief in their own sort of repressed way together, and they rely on each other. That's their new family unit. So it actually, instead of splintering us, instead of shattering us or dividing us, it should be bringing us closer. And it can. And you don't need to have any good things to say. You don't have to speak like Rumi. You don't need to study up on any wise or consoling sentences. Just be there, unafraid. That's all you need to do. And that's all people really need to learn. We should all have a little handbook in our first aid kit next to our Band-Aids. 6 pages that say this is what you do when your neighbor is going through grief for you. Strange, isn't it? I think I'm going to write it. Just occurred to me. I'm not an expert on bereavement or grief, although I've experienced my share. I just feel the need to talk about it because I feel there's a few people that are, especially in the yoga community. In the yoga community, we have terms like, it's all good. Maybe it is, ultimately, in the large universal view of the cosmos, but don't say it to somebody who's standing there watching their house burn down. Don't just say, hey, it's all good. It's all in the plan. It's all part of the plan. You could say that a year from now if you want, but not right now. Not right now. When I teach a yoga class, I always assume that 20 to 25% of my students are going through the worst month of their life. Because it's generally true. I said this yesterday, or 2 days ago, at a workshop in Oregon, and sure enough, somebody comes up to me and says, my father committed suicide a week ago, and that's why I'm here. For those of you who are yoga teachers, I'd really like you to truly believe that on people's worst days, the worst days of their life, they will come to your class. Yeah. So always assume that someone, at least one person, is really going through it and teach accordingly. Because we're all in this together. When 9/11 happened, if you recall, it happened in the morning. And I had an evening class to teach, and of course the yoga center called and said, we just wanted to let you know we're canceling all the classes today. I said, no. Please, I'll come in. I'll do it for free. So they left the studio open for me, and I came in, and 2-3 times the amount of people as usual. And that's when I realized that this culture of yoga is absolutely not going to disappear. It's here to stay. It's where some people go on their worst days, on their very worst days. So it's part of our life. It's part of what we have to do and deal with. Teachers often ask me, if someone starts crying in my class, what should I do? I said, let them cry. Should I go and hold them? Definitely not. You'll embarrass them and they'll leave. What should I do then? Talk about it before it happens. Say sometimes when you're in yoga, it'll bring up feelings. You'll cry. You're in the right place. Don't feel embarrassed. It's going to happen to all of us one day or another. And that way, when it does happen, they already realize this is a safe place for it to occur. When we do breath work, a really interesting thing happens. We're going to do some breath work in a moment. Breath work tends to release anything that we've held in our body. And when some people hear that, holding emotions in your body, that sounds like flying unicorn poop. Doesn't it? It does to me when I hear that, holding emotions in my body. Well, where else do we hold them? Emotions are feelings, aren't they? Where do we feel them? In your brain? Maybe, but where does it feel like to feel them? If you go up to speak in front of 5,000 people with a microphone, let me make it more realistic, 50 people. You feel butterflies in your stomach, not in your brain. When I look across the room and I see her, what pounds? Not my brain. I mean, we have, can I talk to you? I want to get something off my, yeah. I feel like I have the weight of the world on my, where do these things come from? That's where we feel. See, I didn't make this up on the plane on the way over here. You all knew the answers. So we feel these things in our body. And when we do breath work, and that doesn't mean breathe like normal, like when you're eating dinner or watching TV. It means breathing patterns. Just like normal moving isn't working out. Doing movement patterns is working out. Doing breathing patterns has an effect emotionally. It can make you feel really calm during a stressful day. Or if you have anxiety, it can make you feel still again, peaceful. And if you're suppressing grief, which unfortunately most of us are, it'll release it. Now, a lot of people are terrified of this. I've had people tell me, and I quote, if I start crying, it's never going to stop. But I've been teaching for 20 years now, and I have no students that are still crying after all these years. I've never seen it go on for more than an hour. So that's a false fear. It's important to know. I read a new statistic the other day. This is from the World Health Organization. Have you heard of them? Little fringe internet site. By 2020, depression and anxiety will be the leading disability worldwide. By 2020, depression and anxiety will be the leading disability worldwide. This is their prediction. 4 years from now. And disability, for those of you who don't know, doesn't mean you have to be hospitalized. It means that you can't go to work or function as a parent, and so on. I'd like to share with you an interesting thing to think about anxiety, because it's becoming so common now, isn't it? You know people who have anxiety attacks. Maybe you have anxiety attacks. Okay. So last year, I gave a talk like this in front of about 50 CEOs. Interesting crowd, by the way. And I spoke about happiness, breath, and grief. And at the end, I went downstairs to catch a taxi, and one of the CEOs sort of followed me out so no one would see him. And while we were waiting at the sidewalk, he said, "Can I ask you a question? I've started having panic attacks." He told me he was 58 years old and he had just started having panic attacks for the first time in his life. And he says, "I can't have this. I'm in a meeting, running the company, and suddenly I get a screaming headache and I want to run out of the room. This has to go. Do you have any suggestions?" So I asked him a simple question. I said, "Well, when did they start?" He said, "About 6 months ago." So what's the next logical question I would ask him?
6 months ago.
But see, I had to ask him that. Because he didn't put it together. So I asked him, "What happened 6 months ago?" And he said, "What do you mean?" And he's a CEO, he's a smart guy. Divorce, death, bankruptcy, anything like that? And he said, "Well, my brother died about 6 months ago." I asked him, "Were you close?" He said, "Very." "You're a workaholic, aren't you?" I asked him. And he said, "Yes," with some pride. And I said, "Okay. After the funeral, you went right back to work, didn't you?" And he said, "Yeah." Like he thought I was Gandalf by this point. And I said, "You don't have an anxiety issue. You have a grief issue." So what I've learned through teaching so many people to do breath work is the same people who have anxiety are the ones that are carrying the most amount of grief. Anxiety is a symptom of suppressed grief. Not always, but usually. Not always, but usually. Symptoms of anxiety that show physically, for example, if I were just to examine you all sitting here, if I saw any of you fidgeting with your hands, you tend to have anxiety, or fidgeting with your hair, or eyes blinking a lot, or your eyes darting around, or what I call the "I'm just about to have a car accident" look. Like you're holding the wheel bracing to have impact. Some people have it that bad, with a tight jaw. I'm not making fun of you. We all have anxiety at some point. But what I mean is I can see it. So in a class like that, I note who the people are who have anxiety. Then I lead breath sessions, and then I watch all the people with anxiety burst into tears across the room. And then here's the real fascinating thing, is as soon as they weep, their anxiety symptoms are gone. Their hands stop moving, the eyes stop blinking, the eyes start dotting around, the face relaxes. So I told the CEO, "You have a grief issue." He said, "Grief?" He said, what should I do? And I said, "Why don't you come to my workshop tomorrow downtown and doing some breathing?" He said, "Breathing?" To my great surprise, he came anyway. He trusted me, I guess, enough. And he came, and I taught him how to breathe. Breathing patterns. Remember, we're breathing now. I know, it's very funny. People think it's the funniest thing in the world when they say, "You teach breathing?" "I'm breathing now." They laugh. Ha ha. I'll bet you've never heard that before. So he came, I taught him how to breathe. He wrote me 2 months later and he said, "No more panic attacks." All he had to do was 10 minutes a day of breathing. But something else changed too, and that is, he started breathing. He had to. You can't not do it. The only way out of grief is through it. You can't stop it. You can't drug it. And people, unfortunately, are really trying to do that a lot these days. Someone loses their wife or husband, and they go right for the pills. And the doctors encourage them. They'll say, "You lost your husband? I'm so sorry. I'll write you a prescription for..." And if you think I'm exaggerating, a woman I spoke with the other day went to the doctor for migraine pain medication. That's all. The doctor wrote her a prescription for migraine medication, antidepressants, anti-anxiety drugs, and sleep supplements to help her sleep. She didn't ask for any of those. So this is the world we live in now. Drug it first thing, first course of action, as opposed to, why don't you try some other things with no side effects first, and then use the drugs if those don't work. That's reasonable. First course. You seen any of these commercials? Watch CNN, every other commercial's for a drug whose side effects sound like a horror film.
20,000 side effects.
20,000 side effects. Really awful ones. Like permanent coma, that sort of thing. for medicine for skin rash. Permanent coma, skin rash? I'll go for the permanent coma risk. It's not that big of a risk.
Just a few.
Just a few. So really there's two types of breathing that I teach. One is a daily breathing regime, which you really only need to do for 10 or 15 minutes. And that helps you stay reasonably healthy emotionally, whether things are going well for you or it's crisis. And the other is more of a purging breath. It's much more intense for people who are really locked down and have been sitting on something for a long time. Helps bring it right up. And the way I like to describe it for those of you who are visual is if you imagine you're sitting on the beach, you're looking at sand, sky, sand, water, sky, I forgot the water. It's as if your deepest feelings that you're having a hard time connecting to or articulating are underwater. And when you do the breath work, it brings these things up above the horizon so you can see them and understand them. Once you start to understand them, you stop fearing them, because we fear these things that are deep within us. Once you stop fearing them, then you start to heal. The way I like to describe it is grief never comes empty-handed. Grief never comes empty-handed. She always has a gift. And the gift is insight. The gift is insight. Insight into yourself. And that's the positive aspect of crises, is what we learn, although can be harsh, will usually be quite true. All the veils of assumptions, all the veils of denial are pulled aside quite abruptly, and we're forced to look at what is, not what we would wish it would be. And we're forced to then adapt, and that's what's so painful. Adapt to something like losing someone that you're so dear to. Losing your country, losing your career, losing your business, losing your house, all these things. But of course, once we adapt and we're able to breathe in a healthy way, what happens to us next? Did anybody ever hear of Oprah Winfrey? Anybody? I bring her up because her whole career is based on this. Almost all her guests were people who suffered extraordinary crises, and it made them into, as they would say, the people they are today. If a woman calls a rape crisis hotline, who's on the other end of that hotline? A woman who has been raped in the past, for sure. The only therapists that vets are interested in talking to are vets. If you haven't been in a war, they're not interested in going to your therapy class. They figure you don't have any idea what we go through. No idea whatsoever. So when we do come out the other end of our crisis, we become very useful to other people. We become guides, lighthouses, anchors for people. Eventually, as we get older, we become something called elders. Something Americans never want to do. So what I'd like to do with you next, if it's all right with you, is do a little simple breath work. Nothing dramatic, nothing complicated, real basic stuff to give you a taste of this. Because I have a feeling some of you haven't done this before. You're breathing virgins. While others in here have done plenty of breath work, that is. So how are you doing for time? That's about right. Okay. You're all getting ready. Wow. Raise your hand if you're newer to doing any kind of breath work. Thank you. Okay. So for those of you who are newer, I'm going to tell you a couple things that a lot of you already know, but believe me, a lot of people don't know. You might have 3 PhDs and have no idea about how your body works. So it doesn't mean you're not intelligent if I tell you these really basic things. Where are your lungs located? Your lungs are located in the chest. And this is confusing to people because you can inhale and make your belly go out. So it's logical to think that there's air in there, isn't it? I would think so. There it is. But there is no air down there. Your belly moves in and out. There's no air in the belly. The air goes into the lungs, which are all completely in the chest. You have 2 of them, one smaller than the other. And when you fill up your lungs completely, you know what the chest has to do? It has to get out of the way. If you watch joggers who are jogging very softly, they can actually just move their belly out and in. But if you watch sprinters, especially at the end when they're standing still, you can see them better. Their chest is going. Put their hands on their knees. You've done this. Chest, like an accordion, opens and closes, opens and closes. Your chest has to expand to fully inflate your lungs. So if you really want to do deep breathing for all its benefits, you have to open your chest. You can do this voluntarily, you don't have to sprint to do it. Put your hands on your side ribs. See where I have my hands? Bra strap height. Aim your fingers forward. Just have the palms of your hands on your side ribs. If your shoulders don't allow you to put your hands here, you can turn your hands over this way. That's better for you. Now, when you inhale, don't think about your chest going forward. Don't think about it going up, because that keeps your breath up at the upper lungs. Make your chest move out to the sides and back a little bit. Ready? Inhale. Exhale, sit taller. Inhale. Hold. Can you inhale more? Exhale, sit taller. Again, inhale. Good. More. Now hold your breath. Notice what your stomach muscles are doing. I didn't give any directions on stomach muscles, and your stomach is going in. Exhale. So if you're doing shallow breathing, the belly going out and in is fine. But if you want to fully inflate your lungs, you have to open the chest. And when you open the chest, the stomach muscles have to help. The core goes in, helps you open the chest. So for maximum breathing, expand the chest, contract the chest. Now, I mentioned if you stand in front of a microphone, you feel butterflies in the... It's interesting, isn't it? It's not the chest. Anger. When you first get angry, you'll generally feel it also in the solar plexus. Fear, anger, solar plexus. What do you feel in the chest? Anybody? Huh? Grief and the songs on the radio sing about the love. And the other side of love?
Heartbreak.
Heartbreak. Exactly. Love, heartbreak, grief, forgiveness, gratitude. I'm so sorry. People don't say, I'm so sorry. Would you please forgive me? Okay. This part, the chest, full of powerful emotions. He stabbed me in the back of the heart. Still the heart, it's just the other side. But fear, down here. Of course, it takes over the whole body, but it starts here. Anger, here, then it goes up. Okay, so when we do chest breathing, the way I'm describing chest breathing, I don't mean old man breath. See, sometimes doctors will say, don't do chest breathing, but what they mean is, because I've talked to them, they mean this, don't do this. That's true, I agree, don't do that. I spoke with a doctor the other day about breathing, and I wish I could have recorded the conversation. He said, yeah, I tell my patients not to do chest breathing. I said, do you mean this? He says, yes, exactly. I said, okay, that's not what I teach. I agree. He said, you know, most people breathe like that. I said, no, they don't. He said, yes, they do. I put a stethoscope on their back, and I say, please take a deep breath, and they go. And I say, most people in the doctor's office breathe that way. Which is not the same as watching 30, 50, 70 people a day practice yoga. They aren't breathing like that. They're moving their belly in and out. We don't breathe the same way with a cold stethoscope on our back. The average person who knows nothing about breathing thinks you have to lift your shoulders and make a face. Neither of those help, incidentally. So I'm going to ask you to breathe and move your chest out and in like an accordion. You'll need to sit up straight, and here's why. Please slouch. Like you're on Facebook. You're sitting in front of your laptop. Okay. Now slouching, try to take a deep breath. How's that working out for you? That's why we don't slouch. Straight spine, relax your shoulders. And incidentally, if you're trying to teach your teenagers to sit up straight, try showing them that. Because that might actually be a good reason to. So if they're saying, well, just mom and dad want me to do it, that's not a good enough reason. But yeah, you're right, I can't breathe down there. Hands here again. Now, this is only going to take 3 to 4 minutes. Try to keep your hands here the whole time if you can. I'm going to have you do the 4-7-8 breath. We're going to inhale to the count of 4, hold the breath to the count of 7, exhale to the count of 8. Those of you who know ocean breathing or ujjayi breathing, do that. Those of you who have no idea what I just said, inhale through your nose and exhale out like you're blowing out a candle. Okay. Quick exhale. At the count of 4, this speed, inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold your breath. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Exhale to 8. 1, 2, 3, 4. Straight spine, 8. Count of 4. Inhale. 1. Expand out. 4. Hold. 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Inhale. 4. 1, 2. Deeper. Out. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Exhale. 1, 2, 3. Don't fall forward. Keep your spine straight. 8. Inhale. 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Relax. Quick breath in. Relaxed out. Notice how you feel. Close your eyes a moment and just notice how you feel. Open the eyes. Incidentally, this is a good breathing exercise to do under the covers in the dark when you can't fall asleep easily. Try it. It's just, we did that four times. Inhale 4, hold 7, exhale 8. 4 times. You probably won't get to the 4th. Not that anybody has trouble falling asleep. only 80 million Americans. You might also have one shot less in your cappuccino tomorrow. And cut back on the Red Bull, that helps also. Now, one of the things that I didn't address earlier talking about breathing is this funny word, intimacy. When I talk about intimacy now, I'm not referring to romantic intimacy. That's part of it. But most of the intimacy we experience in our life is non-romantic intimacy. It's called friendship. It's called close association, brotherhood, sisterhood, relationships with our children, relationships with our parents. None of that is romantic. So most intimacy is not based on romance. And we also have romantic intimacy. I just want you to be clear what I'm referring to when I say intimacy. If you ask most people, privately especially, when no one else is listening, do you want to have more intimacy in your life? Most people say yes. Most people feel they do not have the amount of intimacy that they would like. Once they know what you mean by intimacy, in other words, would you like to be closer to your children? Would you like to be closer to your parents? Would you like to be able to say I love you without them cracking a joke? Would you like to be able to tell people when you're hurting? Would you like people to accept your help when they're hurting? Most people say yes, very much so. So what creates intimacy? Any ideas?
Trust.
I'm asking, I don't know.
Trust.
Trust. Good. What creates trust?
Evidence.
Sharing.
Friendship.
Sharing and respect. I think in many cases, if you want to improve your relationship, do an overt act of respect. Try that first. Do something that you know would make the other person feel completely respected, because we interpret respect as love, and it makes us trust each other. Even in the lowest form of society, this is my own judgment, I guess, a violent gang activity, I would say, is a pretty low form because it's so brutal. It's all about respect, isn't it? That's the one ethic that is still really held to. You've got to show respect to each other, or else you're going to be hurt or killed. And at the highest level of society, whatever you want to call that, same thing. Respect and love, we hardly can tell the difference. And if that weren't true, we wouldn't say things like this. If you love me, how could you have said that? Because that was disrespectful. If you love me, how could you have done that? Because that feels disrespectful. We can't segregate respect and love. So respect helps to create trust, and trust creates intimacy. Strangely, there are very few songs about either of those things, especially trust, I find. How many songs have you heard? You know, Camille, I think I trust you. It's always love, isn't it? But if there's no trust, that doesn't last long. If you want to create more intimacy, I think one of the ways, besides doing breath work, which actually does help, when you do a lot of breath work, it makes you a better listener. If you're not nervous, if you're not anxious, if you're calm, it's much easier to sit and listen to someone than if you're grinding your teeth, waiting for your turn to talk. If you want more intimacy, becoming a great listener is, I think, stage one. Especially around the holidays. I've always noticed that around the holidays, no matter whose family I get invited to sit with, people take turns talking. No one takes turns listening. No one says, "Excuse me, it's my turn to listen." Also, something that we don't study much in our society, which is completely bizarre when you really give it some thought, is communication. People who have certain careers will study how to speak. Whether you're a news anchor or some sort of professional coach, you're taught some speaking skills, but the rest of us, we don't really learn anything about it. And if you don't think it's important, go to therapy with your spouse and find out. Because so often we think we're communicating with each other. And once we find out what we're actually saying, we agree. But 10 minutes ago, we were thought in total disagreement, which means we're not understanding each other. Those of you with the pen, please write this down. Now, this is the only thing you remember. I hope you remember this. To study communication is studying relationships. It's the same thing. To study communication is to study relationships. It is the same study. There's no difference. If you want to improve your relationships, study communication. Be careful with the words you select. Say exactly what you mean. Don't talk around it. Don't insinuate. Say, this is what I want. Someone did this with me the other day, and I started laughing out loud. And she said, what are you laughing at? I said, you're the first person I've heard speak clearly like that in 2 years. She was talking about a relationship she was having with someone, and she just said, this is what I want from the relationship. And I just went, wow. In one sentence, she could have explained to this man all he needed to know in one sentence. Wouldn't that be great? Let's have a talk about a relationship. One sentence? 2 sentences? Done. Because we said exactly what we want, exactly what we need, respectfully. First question. What did your last crisis or grief event teach you about yourself? That was useful. What did your last crisis or grief event teach you about yourself? That was useful. Next question. There's not very much time, is it? It'll get you thinking though. Next question. Number 2. Who can you call? Which of your friends, acquaintances, relatives can you call when you are going through grief or crisis? Can other people call you? Can people who are in trouble, your friends, I'm talking about not just random people, people in your community, in your family, are you available if they're going through crisis or grief? I'd like to make just a couple of comments before we do the next piece of breathing work. One is, some of you just wrote down a list of people in your life that are grieving. My homework assignment for you is to contact them and to be in their, if possible, in their physical presence. If they're in another state, that's another question, but if they're in town, to go see them, and if they say, no, I'm okay, go anyway. And if you're on that list, if it's one of the hardest times for you right now, is call the people that you just wrote down that you can call. It does take courage. It is intimate. Grief is intimate. It's one of the most intimate things. When we feel grief, we feel helpless. We feel extremely vulnerable, and we feel like we can't change anything. You know, for example, if we lose someone to death, what are you going to do about it? You can't change that. You can only grieve it. And since some of us don't like to feel that, we prefer to feel angry. Some of us, we take our grief and we convert it to anger. This is especially true when couples break up. You see it all the time in divorce. I recently taught a workshop. I have a special workshop on forgiveness that I lead, and at the end of it I opened it up to questions and answers, and a lady raised her hand and she asked a question. Well, she made a statement, really. She said, I've had a lot of anger toward this person for a while. She's pointing to the air, this person. And I used your techniques, because I've been to your workshop before, and I used your techniques. And they worked for a while, but then they stopped working. I got angry with him. Excuse me, with this person again. She would say this person every time. And I could tell by the bitterness in her voice it was an ex-lover, minimally maybe ex-spouse. This was not her mother-in-law. It was definitely a romantic relationship. So I looked at her for a long time, And I said, is it possible that what you're feeling isn't anger? And she said, oh, I'm angry. I said, is it possible that you aren't angry? That you can't stand the fact that you're still grieving this relationship? But it makes you feel vulnerable and helpless. And so you've converted it to anger because it makes you feel powerful and in control. And she just burst into tears. That was the end of that talk. She just started weeping. But it's exactly what it was. So many of us do that. It makes us feel powerful and control. Maybe we'll even take vengeance. So we have to be careful of that. It's a total avoidance of vulnerability and intimacy. And some of us, we try to fix it. If the problem seems remotely fixable, same thing, I won't feel vulnerability, I won't feel grief, I'll try to fix it. And sometimes things can't be fixed. We're going to do a breathing exercise now. I teach people this every weekend. You're going to be fine. Don't be afraid of your own breath. If you're pregnant, though, skip this breathing exercise. If you're pregnant, if you had heart surgery 6 weeks ago, or any serious condition, which you might have, people don't always tell you, you'd be amazed. People come from the hospital straight to the workshop. I'm not kidding you. Other than that, if you're reasonably healthy, do this exercise. We're going to do this together. We're going to do it in unison. It's going to feel a little odd when you first do it. When I first describe it, it's going to feel strange. You've done stranger things. You've done stranger things. It's on the internet. Everybody knows. You've done stranger things for no good reason. There's actually good reason to do this. We're going to breathe very deeply. You're going to slightly, not intentionally, but you're going to slightly hyperventilate. Yes, you will feel a little dizzy, not a lot, a little, don't worry. But if for some reason you do feel very dizzy, you can stop and rest a moment. Take your head below your heart if you want to. Recover. It takes about 60 seconds and start again. We're going to do this breathing exercise in unison. And we're going to use one word to do it. It's a Hebrew word. It's Hai. I think they pronounce it Hai. But unless you speak Hebrew, just Hai. It's like ah-e, not hi. Hai. 2 vowels. It's a Hebrew word and it's an Arabic word, and it means the same thing. It means life. So we're not chanting the name of God, we're just saying life, that's all. Regardless of the meaning of the word, the vowels are important. It regulates how you breathe. When you make an ah sound, a lot of breath comes out. And when you say the e at the end, it's like putting on the brakes. This is not a whisper. This is not you use your voice. Hi. And we're going to do it in unison. And you're going to be okay. And this is not a satanic cult. I invite you to do this with me for 5 minutes. That's all. And then notice how you feel at the end. First time I did this in a retreat environment, we did it for 1 hour. This is just 5 minutes. I'll do the first 4 to set a rhythm. Join me on number 5. Oh, by the way, where are we inhaling? That's right. Expand ribs out when you inhale. Forget about the belly. And instead of thinking about the chest, that's right. Instead of thinking about the chest, think about the heart. As if all this breath comes from the heart center. Not the blood pump. The heart center. Join me on number 5. Hi. 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 Deepest breath in. Slow exhale. Deepest breath in. Hold. Slow exhale. Pause. Deepest breath in. Slow exhale. Pause. In. Slow exhale. Feel free to readjust your legs. Close your eyes and listen to the sound of my voice. Imagine that sitting directly in front of you is a child, 7 or 8 years old, looks very much like you. Sitting directly in front of you is a 7 or 8 year old version of yourself. You've seen photos. There he or she is, with the funny clothes and haircut. Very much alive. You can see this child is breathing and looking up at you. Looking up at the adult version. And in the eyes of this child is a question. How are we doing? How are we doing? Are we happy? Do we still go outside enough? Do we feel safe? Do we have a better family than we did? Look deeply into the eyes of this child. And if this child doesn't look like she or he was always safe, or felt loved or seen, consider lifting this child up into your arms and holding her or him close. And when you do, feel these small arms wrap around your neck with gratitude that finally you have picked him or her up. And whisper in the ear of this child that you will protect her or him. You will love her or him from now on, no matter what. From now on, no matter what. Many of us have done this with our own children but forgotten this one. Unified with this child. This child will never be frightened again. When you're ready, please feel free to lie down on your back for a few minutes. We have plenty of room in here if you spread out just a bit. Relax your heart completely. Let your eyes be closed for just a few more minutes. We'll finish our breath experience together simply by doing the most basic breathing practice that a child can do, that Joel teaches here in this community, which is the hum. We'll start together, sing the same note. When you run out of air, inhale and continue without waiting for me. Once you hear the bell ring, slowly open the mouth so it becomes an ah or o. Good, but louder. More. breath in. Relax it out. We breathe as we reconcile with the past, so that we may have a healthy future. To reconcile with the past does not mean to forget. We move into the future, willing to open the heart and show it to those who love us and who we love. We are not afraid to sit with those who grieve or to support those who are in crisis. We are not afraid. We are all in this together, and we will succeed. When our hearts are fully cracked open, that is when our power is released. May our practice help to heal us and all those around us and all those that we touch in our life. May we build bridges of friendship that can never be broken. Namaste.